Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you everyone for joining today. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm sure we've all been through them before, so thanks for understanding. Today we're doing a webcast in a series we call CA on CA, where CA's GIS department, our IT department, does a presentation on how we use CA products at our own company. So today's topic is on mobile device management and a real-world use case presented by Scott Hancock, who is a senior platform administrator for our IT department, also known as GIS. So I'm going to give Scott the stage now. Thanks so much for joining us and presenting to everyone today. Scott?
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate everybody joining today. Just so you know, I've been at CA for 14 years. For the large majority of that time, I have been implementing and supporting CA tools internally for CA. So this is a role that I've had for quite some time. And MDM has been one of the most enjoyable one of these that I've ever had to do. We've learned a lot of lessons out of it, and I think the experience that we've gone through can be of a lot of value to any of you that are looking to deploy an our MDM solution, or have our MDM solution and are looking how to leverage it. So I'm sure everybody's aware that smartphones and tablets are now an integral part of any workforce's resources in almost any company, whether they're corporate devices or BYOD personal devices. They're used heavily by most users in most companies for all kinds of activities to increase their productivity. So if you look at the first slide that we have presented here, you can see that 80% of users have access to corporate or enterprise resources from at least 2 personal devices.
Hold on one second. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Everyone's saying that they just lost audio.
I did not do anything. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but everyone's popping in and saying they can't hear you, and now it's intermittent. Can anyone hear us now on the line? Okay, it looks like it resolved itself. Must have been a glitch. All right, continue. Sorry about that. Or maybe backtrack just a little bit.
No problem. So as you can see, at this point in most organizations, 80% of users will have the ability to access corporate resources from 2 personal devices. So oh, there it is. I'm sorry, it wasn't moving to the next slide. I apologize. So as IT organizations shift more from managing technology to managing the user's experiencing and having that be the focus of what they do, managing mobile devices will be one of the most critical roles that an IT organization can have. It's as critical now as managing laptops and servers because in essence they really have the same access to the same resources and the same information that those devices do. So this brings a lot of the same challenges and the use cases that need to be addressed in the computer and server management area, along with all kinds of new ones specific to just mobile devices. So what we did at CA is we did an evaluation of what the challenges that we had were, and we had no distinction between corporate-owned devices that were deployed to employees to BYOD devices that employees were bringing in. They all had the same level of access to our corporate resources, to our email, to our network, and this definitely brings all kinds of company security and intellectual property concerns around mobile devices to light. So prior to deploying MDM, we had no control over any of our mobile devices or our application deployment. And just because the IT organization had not come up with a solution for effectively managing mobile devices and deploying applications to them, that did not mean that the business in the areas where they saw they had a real need for this didn't try to do something on their own. So what we started to see is something that, I think most IT organizations to have a challenge with and fight back all the time is, we started to see shadow IT of instances of people that were developing mobile applications and then on top of that developing their own distribution points for how to get those mobile applications to their users. And generally it involved, hosting the application on a web page or on Android, even emailing, users the application file where they would side load it, and what we started to have was, a very disparate organization of how we deployed our mobile applications to our end users. So when deploying MDM and bringing that all under the MDM management, what we've been able to do is create a framework and an infrastructure that will allow us to manage our mobile devices from a single location, manage the asset management around that, the application deployment around that, and device management from a single point. So this eliminated a lot of pain points that users were having with that disparate model that we had before. For one application they would go to one page, for another one they'd have to get an email and get the file. This brought it all under one unified solution and enables us to deliver a much more rich user experience to the end users. So how we figured out how we were going to roll out MDM is we realized that we had over 14,000 mobile devices connecting to our environment every day. So we did analysis of the information that we got from our Exchange message stacks. We found that to be a very critical data point on figuring out what's connecting to the environment, who's connecting to the environment, what they're connecting with. So with that, we were able to break down the metrics to what the bulk of our mobile devices were, even able to break it down by region of where they were, where it was most dominant. And from that, we came out with a strategy that would allow us to gain control over 85% of our mobile devices that are connecting to our environment using our CA MDM solution. So initially what we wanted to be able to do is we wanted to be able to block access to our corporate resources from rooted or jailbroken devices, and we would do that by blocking their ability to get to Exchange ActiveSync to get their mail, or having access to the corporate application store that MDM is able to create. So with MDM deployed now, we now have a framework and an infrastructure that's able to efficiently manage our entire mobile environment. So initially, from the information that we gathered, we decided that we would initially roll out MDM to our iOS users, and then after that to our Android, Samsung devices. One of the ways that we are going to enforce people to enroll MDM on their devices would be to leverage a feature within MDM that is called EAC and stands for Email Access Control. And what that allows you to do is that if a device is not enrolled in MDM, when they go to access the ActiveSync connection to get their corporate email on their device, they won't have access. So to get access to their email, they'll have to enroll in MDM, and then again they would get access back to their email. So the first phase that we did this, though, was completely voluntary. We sent communications to all of our iOS users requesting that they enrolled. We provided detailed instructions, and from just a voluntary standpoint, we received about a 20% participation rate in MDM. Phase 2, which we're still currently moving into, is where we will enable that email access control feature that we have. And this will be the driver to really get users that are resistant to enroll in MDM because access to your corporate mail on your mobile device is critical, I think, for most people's job functions and is a good driver for getting them to install MDM. But besides forcing MDM down on them, one of the other critical things that we feel that you need to deliver is you need to deliver productivity and resources to the end users. So to that endpoint, using the MDM application store that's available to publish applications in, we were able to use MDM to drive the deployment of Lync, OneDrive, and the Microsoft Office Mobility Suite to our iOS users. And now, once you've deployed an application through MDM, one of the really big benefits that you get out of that is you get the management over that application. So if Lync has been deployed through MDM and down the road a new version of Lync comes out, there's no need to send a communication to end user to say, upgrade to the latest Lync, you'll get all these new features and functionalities. Through MDM, you're able to just update the policy that publishes the Lync application to those devices, and they'll automatically get either in their catalog, they can go in and select the new Lync application, or you can actually make the application a required application, and it'll just automatically deploy down to the end user's device, and they'll automatically have the new features and functionalities that are available. And even in the case of like security issues, if something came up where it was known security issue that was serious enough to be addressed, you could deploy a new version of an application that closed up that security hole via MDM without any interaction with the end users. You could just push the software to the devices. One of the other highlights that we had with our MDM deployment was that we had developed internally an application called OneAccess, would delivered a single sign-on experience for multiple native applications that we hosted internally. This was something that was showcased at CA World. I won't really cover it here, but it really let our management and our IT team know how effective our MDM application can be with getting new applications out to end users that provide brand new features, brand new productivity, and do it in a very easy and simple way. The next steps that we're looking to take with our MDM implementation is to integrate it with our client automation environment, and that is what we use to manage our desktops and laptops throughout the company. And it gives us very similar controls around mobile devices. MDM gives us very similar controls around mobile devices that client automation gives us around servers and laptops and desktops. And I think IT organizations need to start looking at their environment not as two disparate things of laptops and desktops and mobile devices, but it really needs to be a unified view that you can have the ability to manage from one single location. So GIS's next direction is to integrate our MDM solution with our client automation solution so we can end up with what we'd like to call maybe a single pane of glass look into all of our devices throughout the company, whether they're computers or mobile devices. We'll be able to have all the metrics and asset information around all those devices and be able to make intelligent decisions on any initiatives that we're taking on to roll out applications or upgrade hardware or things of those nature that IT organizations have to handle. And the driver for that, one of the big drivers from that is, not too long ago, the the support ratio for most IT organizations was, mostly a 1-to-1 ratio. I mean, most users had a laptop or a desktop, and that's what they used as their primary device for being productive. And now, in a lot of roles within most companies, I find that the ratio has gone from a 1-to-1 to a 1-to-3 ratio. They have a laptop, they have a mobile device, and they have a tablet. And these are all things that they use in different roles within their functions to get their job done. So with the proliferation of those mobile devices, it's become more and more imperative that we look at how those mobile devices connect to our environment and how we can manage them to protect our IP resources and our security concerns around those devices. Oh, I thought I had one more slide in there. So, I would say the biggest lesson that we've learned out of our MDM deployment, it really was not, our biggest challenges were really not around technical issues or technical deployment issues. Not that we didn't have those, but those are the types of things that we're normally used to handling. The biggest lesson that we learned out of it was because we were touching people's mobile devices, whether they were corporate devices or BYOD devices, because they're people's personal mobile devices, they seem to have a much more protective view of those devices, because even if it's a corporate deployed device, most users are using that device for dual purpose. They're using it for their corporate needs, and they're using it for their personal needs. Most people are not carrying around two devices, one for work and one for personal use. So what we found was that when we went to go deploy MDM, there were a lot of pushback from the end user community around concerns around, and legitimate concerns around the privacy of their device, what we were going to have insight into, what we were going to be collecting, and what we were going to be reviewing on those devices. And in all honesty, when we initially started, we probably did not do as good a job as we could have done, and that's why we had that pushback. So one of the strategies that we developed going forward after we had that pushback is we developed a very comprehensive FAQ around what the capabilities that a MDM solution has on a mobile device, and then we highlighted what we were going to be leveraging in our mobile device management solution. And from a CA/GIS perspective, what we were looking to do was we wanted to manage the user's email configuration so that we could control where their native email client was pointed to, and that was so that we could support another initiative we have going on of migrating from on-premise Exchange to cloud-based Exchange. So by being able to manage the email configuration on a user's device, as we move them over from one platform to another platform, we would be able to automatically reconfigure their mobile device to point to the right location and have them have their email with as little interruption to access that email as possible. So we created that FAQ that stated what we were going to be managing and what we were going to be collecting. But even more important than what we put in the FAQ around what we were managing, even more importantly, what we included in there was what we were not managing. People had very, very legitimate concerns around, will you have access to my private photos? Will you have access to the content of a text I sent? Will you care if I have Candy Crush installed on my phone? Because it's a corporate device and that's a game, and people were worried about things like that. So when we developed that FAQ, we were very clear on what we were looking to manage, and very clear on what we were not having insight into, and very clear about what we were not concerned about. We are not concerned about any applications installed on a user's iOS device When we do roll out to Android devices, there will be a slight change in that model. There are in the Android world, it's a little different than iOS. There are blacklisted applications that you don't want on users' devices, and we will leverage features that are available in the MDM solution so that we can blacklist those applications and we can block rooted and jailbroken phones. But once we got that FAQ out to end users, our voluntarily enrollment increased drastically. We have about 60% of all iOS users enrolled, a little less than that on the device percentage point. And now as we look forward to enable the EAC portion, the email access portion of MDM, we believe we're going to get a very, very high participation rate in deploying MDM to the end user. And I think one of the key things going forward is that we just have to keep adding more functionality and more value to what we provide in our application store as far as productivity applications that we can deliver to the workforce and how they can use them and have access to them much easier than having to search through the Google Play Store or the App Store or things like that.
All right, thank you, Scott. Did you have anything else you wanted to add before we break into Q&A in a bit?
No, not really. Like I said, the biggest lesson we learned out of our MDM deployment wasn't the technical challenges. It really is around the process and the social communication of what you're looking to do. Because like I said, people are really protective of their mobile devices, more so than I've ever seen them be protective of their laptop or desktop. They've always been willing to accept security pushes or whatever to their laptop. They understand it's a needed feature to maintain the security and the integrity of a company's environment. It's important to start making people understand that same relationship exists with a mobile device. I think a lot of end users don't see the risk that a mobile device accessing corporate resources really is almost the same risk as an unsecured laptop or desktop accessing the environment. So you need to make them understand that while they do have legitimate concerns about their personal identifiable information that they're concerned about and their personal portion of the device that they're concerned about, it needs to be a partnership with the company that they're working for, that the company is also going to have legitimate security concerns around how we secure that device. So I think the communication between the business and the end users to make sure everybody understands what we're looking to accomplish, what the company will be controlling, and then more specifically what they're not controlling is really one of the critical pieces to having a successful MDM rollout that has as little resistance as possible. I mean, any rollout of any kind, anybody in an IT organization knows there's always squeaky wheels. There's always going to be people that need more justification or want to understand more. And I think if you develop that communication plan thoroughly and early, you can minimize those users that you have to go through and reassure that it's really for the company's good. It's not going to impact their ability to be productive, and it's not going to have any insight to anything that they would be concerned with as from a personal information standpoint.
Great, thank you so much. So we're going to open it up for Q&A. You can ask questions a few different ways. You can do it in the Q&A panel in WebEx or in the chat window. You can also unmute your line by pressing pound or *6. Or you can go to the CA Mobility community and ask a question there. We'll have Scott as well as some folks from the Enterprise Mobility Management team in there to answer your questions. So if you go to ca.com/talkmobility, you can fill out a question. Right at the top of the page it says ask a question, and you can type it in and post it right there. And then let's see, we have a question here from Jonathan Pascal. Scott, if CA users aren't enrolled in MDM, can they still access Outlook via mobile browser?
It depends on what stance that your organization takes. You know, from an Exchange standpoint, you can block third-party applications like OWA or the new Outlook app or Touchdown, but users would still be able to get to their mobile mail if you had like a webmail portal, and that is what we're informing our end users that, you know, for whatever reason, if you are choosing not to participate in our MDM deployment, you know, you won't be able to access your email via your native mail client, and you'll have to go through our webmail portal to get that email. But you know, it doesn't provide, you know, the webmail portal does not provide as rich or as easy a user experience for an end user to manage their mail as a native mail client does. So we're hoping that's one of the drivers to really help people move towards installing MDM.
Great. All right, we have another question from Ramdas Kathaskoda. He's asking, I belong to the BYOD category and use my own Android device and use it for email, link, UIM, timesheet, and service desk. What kind of privileges does MDM component have on my own device?
So the CA MDM component, you know, any MDM solution deployed to a mobile device does gain a vast amount of control over the device. We can control things as far as down as, you know, having to connect to a specific a wireless network. We can disable cameras that are needed as a use case by use case basis. These are not things that we are leveraging on the GIS side, but there are definitely businesses where, say you have contractors that work in a government complex, you know, that there are policies around not having cameras being able to work in areas like that. So for those users, you would be able to control on their device, turn off their camera for those consultants that are in that facility. There is a large amount of control that is given over a device when you install MDM on it. And one of the things that is an end user will see, and this is really one of the things that drove the concerns that our end users had. When you enroll any iOS device or Android device in an MDM solution, you do get a message, not from our MDM solution, not from the Android MDM solution, but from the operating system itself that says if you install this MDM client on your device, please be aware that it will have control over these portions of your phone, and it is pretty extensive. So that's where I think it's really critical, because when people see that, that's what makes them nervous about what we're going to have insight into and what we're going to do. For our use case in GIS, you know, it's a smaller use case of what we're trying to accomplish. So it was really critical for us to let our end users know we're not leveraging all of the capabilities that an MDM solution does give us on your device. These are the points that we're trying to hit, and these are specifically the points that we are not going to have access to, and that really seemed to alleviate most people's concerns around the control we had. And that's not to say that down the road, if a new use case pops up where something does need to be managed, you know, more granularly that we're not managing now, that we won't manage it. But you know, that would not be something that would just be done in a vacuum. You know, that would have to, you know, be decided by our management and then be communicated to the end users. And of course, we would engage with the end users with any concerns that they had. But you know, absolutely. You know, this is our initial MDM rollout. We're managing what we think is the most critical things right now, which is jailbroken devices and email configuration, but that does not mean that we will not look to manage more features of a mobile device down the road.
Great, thank you. We also have a question from Tim. He's asking where he can find the FAQ documents that you mentioned earlier.
The FAQ documents are sent out with the instructions to enroll in MDM. I don't know if we have them on a publicly facing SharePoint site or anything, but if you can get me his email information, I'd be more than happy to send him over the latest version of the FAQ, and then I'll also see if there's a place that we can publish it publicly, and I can provide that link to you guys so that we can make that available to everybody.
Yeah, let's go with that. Let's publish it to the CA Mobility community, and then I will include a link to that in the follow-up email to everyone who attended this webcast today.
Okay, you got it.
All right, we got another question from Ramdas. How can I avoid certain applications from being pushed on my device, which I don't use at all, with this MDM component installed on my device?
The short answer is you can't, Ramdas. If it's been deemed by management to be a required application, we push it to all devices. If you think this is a real inconvenience and something that does impact your ability to use your phone or the performance of your phone, we'd be more than happy to entertain a conversation around seeing if we can develop a strategy for excluding certain people from certain applications. But the applications that we're pushing right now, those have been deemed by our upper management as what they want deployed to end user devices when they receive MDM. And I do think a lot of them do provide a lot of productivity and resources to you that can be helpful. But right now, if it's a required app, if you uninstall it from your application, when your device gets reevaluated by the MDM enterprise, it'll re-push that software back down to you.
All right, great. And if anyone needs more details about that internally, you can email Scott and connect with him offline. We have a question from Devin. Can you push applications to specific devices, and if yes, how?
Sure, there's a couple ways we can push applications to specific devices. Within MDM, there's a varied amount of different types of groups you can create. One of them you can create is a static group, where you could just go in and grab the specific devices that you wanted to deploy an application to, add them to that static group, and then you would associate a software policy to that group, and it would automatically push them. One of the other things that I think is a very useful feature within MDM, because it's able to leverage the Active Directory environment that most organizations are going to have in place, is you can publish applications to Active Directory groups. So that's one of the things that we're looking to do here at CA, is to use the very rich Active Directory infrastructure that we have, with all kinds of predefined groups around roles and organizations that already exist. If an organization has a need for a specific application for their role, say it be sales or development, if they have an Active Directory group already defined for that role or organization, we can bring that Active Directory group into MDM and publish the software against that. So if it's a sales tool, we can publish a sales tool just to the salespeople. So that either a static group or a Active Directory group can do that. And then if you also had a need to publish software based upon device, you can also create groups based around, iPad only, iPhone only, Android only, even certain models of Android or certain levels of iOS operating system. You could create groups around any of those metrics and publish software just to those groups that meet that criteria.
Okay, great. Does anyone have a question on the phone line? If so, go ahead and press #6 to unmute yourself. While we wait for some of our phone callers to unmute their line, you can contact Scott offline if you have any questions by emailing him. His email is up on the screen right now, scott.hancock@ca.com.
Scott, can you hear me? This is Ramdas.
Hey, Ramdas. Yes, I can.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, in future, if for BIOD category, if we want to opt out of MDM, does this mean that we cannot access corporate email using our own devices at all?
You would have to access your corporate email using webmail. You wouldn't be able to access it using the native email client on the device.
The examples are nowadays we are getting a containerized email apps, like there are certain apps on Android Play Store and iOS Play Store as well. So I'm asking, like, if we use those apps, will that also be through that also the access will be terminated, or can we use such applications?
Applications like OWA and Outlook.com, the Outlook app that was recently the Acompli app, Touchdown, things like that, may look to be I don't know what management standpoint is right now, Ramdas. I do know that they're looking to drive the deployment of MDM to as many of the mobile devices throughout the company as we can. And that may be one of the strategies that they do take, that we would also block OWA. Basically we would block all ActiveSync devices from our Exchange environment unless it came from our MDM, the email access control portion of MDM. What it'll do is once you're enrolled in MDM, it has an integration with the Exchange environments, and it puts an explicit allow rule in for that device ID. So the device itself has to be enrolled in MDM for you to be able to get email.
Thank you, Scott.
I see somebody asked a question here on any plans to support the Windows Phone. We do currently support Windows phones with our MDM solution. We are, in the next iteration, going to support the next level of Windows Phone, which I think is 8.1. So yes, we are going to plan to support Windows Phone, and Windows Phones will be part of our the scope of what we manage in our environment.
We also have a question from Brian asking if MDM can be used for email setup and email access control for both local Exchange and Exchange 365 users.
Actually, one of the big wins that we got out of this initiative that we do, CA on CA, is the GIS organization working very closely with the development organization. And when we initially started our MDM deployment, we did not have that capability. What I have figured out how to do is a way to support a split mail environment using MDM, and the way that we've done that is that the MDM development team has enhanced their email access control, where you can enter in multiple web hosts that devices are set to configure to. So you can put in your webmail address and the credentials that have access to that webmail to be able to grant access to Exchange. And then you can also include your Office 360, your Outlook.com credentials, and the URL to that with the same credentials that have access to that. The only caveat that I'll have to tell you is that to be able to support that, what we had to do here at CA is we had to leverage our an Active Directory extension in our Active Directory. So every user in the company, what we did is we took all of the users that were on Exchange on-premise, and we populated a Active Directory extension with our webmail address for that web host. And then anybody who is on the Outlook.com solution, on the web-based mail solution, we populated the attribute with the web host for that email environment. And then inside our enrollment policy, you're able to use a wildcard, a directory. You're able to create a wildcard that, rather than using a hard-coded web host address, what we populated in there was the extension attribute that we populated. So now when a user enrolls in MDM, it looks at what is populated in that Active Directory extension and uses that to configure their email. So if they're on-premise, they get configured for on-premise. If they're in the cloud email, they get configured for the cloud email. And then we also had to build into the process with our IT organization the migration process of moving people from on-premise to Exchange Online. That part of that process was the updating of that Active Directory extension attribute. And then when MDM sees that that Active Directory extension attribute has changed, it will reconfigure their email client on their phone to point them to the right host now. So as users move from on-premise to cloud, MDM will be able to facilitate the reconfiguration of the email that's been set up from on-premise to cloud as well.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions on the phone? I don't see any more in the chat window or the Q&A window. Go ahead and press #6 if you have any questions.
Scott, can you just talk about what happens if if a CA resource is terminated? Tell me what happens with that scenario.
Sure. Absolutely, absolutely. There is a feature within MDM that when you turn it on, basically what it does is it ties to your Active Directory. So what we do is we turn on that feature. If an employee is terminated, it depends on the region. In our organization, in North America, I understand, if an employee is terminated or moves on to another role in another company, we don't recover their mobile device. They keep their mobile device. So as soon as that user's Active Directory account is deactivated, MDM has a mechanism in place that will deprovision all of the CA resources that have been deployed to that device. So it will remove the MDM application itself. It will remove any of the applications that were deployed through MDM, and it will remove the email account that was configured via MDM. So once an employee leaves and their Active Directory account is disabled, a short time later, all of the resources that were deployed to that device via MDM should be removed, and none of the user's private information or any other information that was not corporate should be affected.
Scott.
Thank you. Did that answer your question?
It does, because I was more worried about, like, okay, will the users have an ability to uninstall in that scenario, because they might have moved on and they don't want any accidents to happen, and for whatever security reason, because I understand that the Active Directory will be disabled so that I cannot access any CA emails or any applications through that. So, but since it is having admin access, my personal stuff is also there, so that was my concern.
Absolutely. Yep. A very legitimate concern.
All right, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much, Scott, for presenting today and for your insight and answering everyone's questions. This is a really cool product and definitely a lot of conversation happening around it in the CA mobility community. So again, if you have any questions or want to continue the conversation, please go to the community at ca.com/talkmobility. I'll send out a link to the community as well as a link to the recording from this webcast, the slides that Scott presented, as well as that FAQ document to everyone who attended the call today. So thanks again, Scott. Thanks again, everyone, for joining, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week.
Thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.